So how does your unleavened bread go?
I almost forgot. We went out to dinner the other night. I was getting ready to pick something up. I'm like, oh, don't drop it.
You know, invariably, I find a package of hot dog buns or something crammed in the corner in the freezer, and it's like, well, I'm going to hell now, you know. Not really.
The hot dog buns was one.
I think grace covers that, but it is tough to remember, you know. When was it, last night? I said, let's just get a pizza and watch a movie.
That's so easy.
No.
Oh,
Oh yeah, we were like, let's make burger. Oh, let's make hot dog. Nope.
yeah, so it is difficult. And I think it's supposed to be. I think, you know, getting the sin out of our life is not an easy process.
So when people take their ferments out and they put it in their garage, or they sell it to their Gentile neighbor, but then you buy it back.
Yeah.
So you bring in the sin back.
You're welcoming it back in.
Yeah.
Listen for a minute and I'll take it right back.
Well, a
And-
lot of people don't even eat any kind of flour. They don't eat flour, corn. Like everything has to come out of the house, so you don't want to throw it out.
Yeah, a lot of people do all leaven, like even chemical reactions like baking powder and stuff. I don't, I used to be real anal about it. But then, they didn't have baking powder and such back then.
Oh,
It
that's
was-
in Passover food.
Huh?
Baking powder, they put that in Passover food.
Yeah. So, so the chemical reaction stuff, I think is okay.
Well, it's not gonna just happen.
Right.
It's not gonna pick up baking powder in the air.
But it does pick up yeast out of the air. Which blew me away, and I didn't understand that process. So I made some sourdough the ancient way, where you put it in a crock with a moist towel over the top of it, like moist cheesecloth. And sure enough, it rose. You know,
I was
it's like,
looking up an unleavened bread recipe, and they had, like, we're used to eat it to rise 2 different times. And I'm like, wait, no, it's not unleavened bread, it's unleavened rice twice. Because they didn't have the yeast or nothing else in it. But I'm like, you're picking up the yeast in the air.
but it is difficult. So you have to be intentional about it, I think, you know, and so I drew on the board, a excerpt from the calendar. So it's the middle 2 weeks of the calendar. These numbers, the red numbers above it, represent the days of the week. The blue numbers represent the days of the month. More Orthodox brothers do count for the Sabbath and all, is they cite the first sliver for the beginning of the month. However, the beginning of the month may not be the beginning of the week, which I don't understand, but it has to be that way to make it work on the Gregorian calendar, because the Gregorian calendar, as we know, is 30 and 31 days, except for February, and then it's 28, and then you got a leap year, 29. But when you lay Yahweh's 28-day calendar on top of the Gregorian calendar, things get confusing. And you know, as often it happens when we try to mix Yahweh's things with the world. It gets confusing. And that's one of the huge sins, in my opinion. Aaron's sons died over it. They brought strange fire, right? And Yahweh killed them. And so when we make the holy things common, that's not a good thing. So I tell folks, have Yahweh's calendar, and then we live by the Gregorian calendar, but don't overlay them. If you don't overlay them, some incredible things happen. Sabbath never moves. It's always on the seventh day, just like Scripture says. In the Shabbats for the month are day 7, day 14, day 21, and day 28. And that's it. So I drew this chart up here. So we got dark hours and we got light hours. So I got the days of the month on the light hours, but it includes the darkness, right? So if we're going to talk about when does the night begin, it begins at sundown on the 8th, right? So if we look at this, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 14 is a 7. It's a Sabbath. What else is it in the first month?
Passover.
It's also Passover. Passover falls on the weekly Sabbath. And Yahweh designed it that way. This is not the calendar according to Tom. But all of that starts at Reb Shabbat at sundown on the 13th. So we go through the dark hours on the 13th, and we wrap around and go through the dark hours, the morning dark hours on the 14th, then we have the light hours, and then it gets dark again. So I tried to depict that, and in the first month, on the 10th, okay. I guess so. Good idea. So let's go to Leviticus 23.
And the Lord spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, The feast of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of the Lord, holy convocations which you shall proclaim in their appointed times.
All right, first of all, who's speaking here?
The Father.
The Father, right? So this section, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of solemn rest. Scoot back a little bit, Darman. Okay. So he addresses Moshe and says, these are my feasts. And then verse 3, he says, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest. This, verse 3, is a parenthetical statement. It is. Because he's talking about the feast, then he talks about the Sabbath, and skip down to verse 4. And then verse 4, he says, these are the feasts of Yahweh. So he says, these are my feasts, parenthetical statement about Sabbath. And then verse 4, he reiterates, these are my feasts, holy convocations. So it is a parenthetical statement in verse 3, but how many know that a parenthetical statement is extra information so that you can understand what he's talking about?
Makes sense.
So, if I was to ask you right now, is Sabbath an appointed time?
Yes,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Once he said the seventh day is Sabbath, he took the seventh day and set it apart, right? Okay, that's important. So continue.
These are the feasts of the Lord, holy convocations which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Lord's Passover. And the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, but you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord for 7 days. The seventh day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it.
Okay. So, what day is Passover? It's the 14th day, right?
Right.
A Reb Shabbat and a Reb Passover are at the same time on the 13th at evening. Because when evening starts here, we're already into the 15th day. Got a pointer. And then he says, for 7 days. So, stop myself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 21, is that a 7?
Yes.
So it's a Sabbath, and it's the Sabbath of unleavened bread, because Passover is on Sabbath, but the 15th day is the next day, and it starts unleavened bread. Now, to confuse matters even more, a lot of the Orthodox refer to that whole time, they refer to from the 14th to the 21st, they refer to that as Passover or unleavened bread. They just group it all together and say that's Passover. It's not Passover, it's two different things and they have two different dates. The 15th day being the beginning of unleavened bread. So, let's continue.
And the Lord spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give to you, and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And you shall offer on that day, when you wave the sheaf, a male lamb of the first year without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord. Its grain offering shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering made by fire to the Lord for a sweet aroma. And its drink offering shall be wine, 1/4 of a hin. You shall eat neither bread, nor parched grain, nor fresh grain, until the same day that you have brought an offering to your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings.
Okay. So, when is first fruits?
Right there.
Yeah. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So, we go back to our calendar, and this is unleavened bread. The 21st is the next Shabbat, so the 22nd day would be the day of first fruits. Does that make sense? It's the day after the Sabbath of unleavened bread. And I've got some Orthodox friends that don't even keep first fruits as a Moedim or a Moed.
So Tom, if you believe that Yeshua rose on would be Saturday, Sunday morning, then he was the first, people say he rose on first fruits, because they say it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, but, so what they're saying, that's a very good point, Nicole. What they're saying is the 15th day is first fruits. Because it's the day after the Sabbath. But if we follow this in chronological order, we have to go through unleavened bread, and we get to the Sabbath on the 21st day. And so, this is the day after the 22nd day. Because, well, let's just reverse engineer it. If Yeshua is our Passover, 1 Corinthians 5:10, I think, Paul says, Yeshua is our Passover, then he had to follow the rules of the Passover lamb, right? Which are what?
Male of the first year, without spot or blemish, killed at twilight.
So, if he's got to die at twilight as we go into the 14th day, he could not have been meeting with his disciples on that day, right? So, they met on the 12th day. In the evening, the dark hours.
Side question. Is it Passover that there's the 2 lambs given, or when is it that the 2 lambs are given? Like the one for the people, is that different?
So there's the personal lamb, and then there's the national lamb.
But it's done at the same time?
It's got that at the same time, yeah. And actually, they start killing lambs before twilight, actually, because I got a bunch of them. And I did it one year. I took a lamb of the first year, and if you get a lamb that's a year old, that thing's a pretty good size, you know. But you can have a lamb from 1 day old to 12 months old. You see what I mean? 'Cause that's the first year. So I killed one that was 12 months old. And by the time I killed it, between the eaves, let him bleed out, love him through the process of bleeding out, then carrying that dude back to the house, preparing him, put him on the spit, roast him over fire. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when we ate that lamb. It takes an amount of time to do all that. So the 21st day is the Sabbath during unleavened bread. And unleavened bread is over the evening of the 21st day, or the evening of the 22nd day, but it's on the 21st. That way you get your 7 days of unleavened bread. Otherwise, you're getting the horse before the cart. So on the 10th day, we take the lambs, right, in our house. We kill it at twilight as we go into the 14th day, so Yeshua had to meet with the Talmudim as it was getting dark on the 12th. And they went to the Mount of Olives, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the dark hours, and he was arrested the dark hours, the pre-dawn hours on the 13th. He was brought before the Sanhedrin, which is illegal, it's against Torah. You can't hold, the Sanhedrin can't hold anything in the dark. They did. They sent him to Pontius Pilate. Pilate sent him to Herod. Herod said, "Oh no," sent him back to Pilate. Pilate declared him without spot or blemish and turned him over to be scourged on the 13th day. As the sun is setting, he died on the eve of the 14th day. So let's just count it. Remember, they had to hurry and take him off the cross. So he's in the dark hours right here. He's in the tomb. And that was good. He's in the tomb, the daylight hours of the 14th, which is Passover. As it gets to evening, he's in the tomb. In the tomb on the 15th day, the dark hours of the 15th day, the lighted hours of the 16th. In between, there's really no text to say, but between the dark hours as they've begun, here and here, he was resurrected. Because Mary got to the tomb, the quickest she could get to the tomb would be the 17th day. He wasn't there. So, let's count them. 1, 2, 3 nights. 1, 2, 3 days. So he was resurrected in the dark hours of the 17th day, which is also the third day of the week, which he said. He said, I will rise on the third day of the week. They took up the week out of the scriptures. So in the English translation, it just says, he says he'll rise on the third day. But it was the third day of the week. And so this is one of the proof texts of the lunar Shabbat. Because only by this does he spend 3 full nights and 3 full days in the tomb.
Tom, it does seem like 3 is a biblical repeating, like you go in the book of Esther. She fasted for 3 days because she didn't know when she was before the king if she was going to be.
Right.
Where else is it? We just heard that the other day, another 3 days. There's
It
actually,
is a, they call it the messianic, one of the messianic numbers, because they use the Trinity. I don't like that word, because there's the unholy Trinity. But Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that's 3. That's kind of Yahweh's thumbprint. And if you think about a family, you have a daddy and mama and children. That's 3, you know. And that's why the state has tried to, when I say the state, I don't mean Colorado, I mean the government, has tried to replace the husband in the home and as provider. And you can even go back and look at the sitcoms for a while. Men are depicted to be very stupid. But anyway, so
I have a question on this, on the Feast of First Fruits. Okay, where does that get tied to the end of unleavened bread? Because all I'm seeing there is it says when you harvest, that's when you do it. I mean, are they harvesting? Are they going out the day after unleavened bread and harvesting their crops, or you harvest your crops when they're ready?
right.
So does it necessarily? I mean, I guess I'm missing how it ties to unleavened bread. To me, it's a separate thing. It seems like a separate thing. When you would harvest your crops, that's when you would start your first fruits.
So that's a very good question. If the barley is a bead, in the 12th month, by this calendar, it gives you 21 days to get from green in the ear to ready for harvest. Okay? So, the command, verse 4, these are the feast of Yahweh, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. On the 14th day of the first month, at twilight, is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation, and you shall do no customary work on it. And on down towards the bottom of the screen it says, the 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. So, on unleavened bread, this is the first day. So it's what they call a high Shabbat. But it's not a 7, but Yahweh said it's a Sabbath, right? Now the 21st day falls on a Sabbath, but these days, the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th, you can reap your crop.
Okay.
They're not Sabbath. So, and that's what held Miriam up, because we're in the Sabbath when the sun went down on the 13th. We start Passover. It's a weekly Sabbath. And then the 15th is a high Shabbat. The 16th, she gathered the herbs together, but they can't go to the tomb after dark, so she had to wait till the next day when it was daylight. So, yeah, so they harvested here. And that would give you enough time for your crop to be ready to harvest, because it's got to die, right? And then it's got to dry out. I had a friend, he took over his dad's farm, and he had acres and acres of milo. And he said, it's ready. And he needed the money, but I told him, Brent, it's not ready. And so normally you take a seed sample to the mill, and they run a moisture content on it. And if it's too wet, if that number is too high, they won't take it because it's going to mold in their silos, right? So we had 5 trailers loaded, and I took the first trailer up there, and it was too wet. And I came back and I said, Brent, it's too wet. They won't take it. He goes, what are we going to do? Well, I said, we ain't going to do nothing. You're going to get a shovel and turn these trailers, or you're going to lose them, you know.
Right.
So there has to be a period of time between a bee and harvest time. So.
Is that the barley harvest?
Yes.
Okay. Cause then in the fall it's other.
Yeah, it's wheat, and then, well, Shavuot, I think is wheat, and Tabernacles is grapes
Oh,
and olives. So all the oat feast are around harvest time, which is interesting, because where do all the males have to be?
Temple Mount.
Temple Mount.
How do they harvest their field if they have to be at Temple Mount? I don't know,
Right.
because what if I live 3 days from Temple Mount?
Right.
You know, I can't get home quick enough to do the harvest, and then be back at Temple Mount for the Sabbath.
Right.
So there's some questions I have. Now, one practice that they did was they parched the grain with fire. And that's why it says something about parched grain.
Roasted grain,
Yeah. Yeah, it's down there, parched grain, or, yeah.
Yeah.
It is blemished.
And another question,
Parched grain, 14.
Amber asked me this question, and I don't have an answer for it. Because we're in exile, we're not in Israel, we're not at Temple Mount, but that doesn't excuse some of the sacrifices. Because you can do the man can do the sacrifice for his family. Why don't we do the sacrifices? I don't know.
Well, don't you need the priest and
Well, not if you're in exile. The man is the priest of his house. So, yeah, I don't know why we don't. it would be very expensive to do all the sacrifices, you know. So that's unleavened bread, and that's when it's over. It'll be over. Let's see, this is,
According to that calendar, it should be over Tuesday morning, right?
well, so this would be, on Monday, right? Evening. So, yeah,
Sunset
the evening on
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So Tuesday, no work?
Yes, Tuesday number. So, and that brings up another
The
question.
evening of Tuesday, right?
Huh?
Did you say the evening of Tuesday? No. it's
It
the
ends
end.
it, yeah, it ends the evening of Tuesday.
So that means Tuesday.
Yeah, it would be Tuesday as the sun sets.
Okay.
Because that'd be the start of
So
Wednesday.
Roger's still got any lots of. Just the technical part. Yeah, just the technical.
Yeah.
So if y'all want to gather, we can do hamburgers, and since Priscilla's not here, we can volunteer her. Or we can do it at our house to break, because this is a fast. We're fasting from yeast, you know. So Tuesday night.
You want me to ask Priscilla?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to put a whole lot on her, you know, because her family's here.
Yeah.
She may be wore out. And if that's the case, we can do it at our house. But, here's another question. How do we keep the Sabbath if we have to work?
Tough.
Good question, huh?
I think that's where the convenient argument people like to say is that Jesus put that all, when he said it is finished, he wiped all that out.
Right.
I think that's just a convenient way of justifying someone's brain. Yeah, I think we're supposed to, but
Yeah, the reason, does everybody know why he said it is finished?
the scales, the wages of death were paid.
Well, when the high priest kills the national lamb, which is the last lamb to be killed, he says it is finished. So Yeshua was the high priest, and that's why he said that. But that's a good question, because it's very difficult to keep Sabbath this away. And I know people that, because of that reason, they keep it on Saturday, which is fine, I don't care. Just do it on Saturday, you know, if you think Sunday's Sabbath, do Sunday. Because we need to learn how to keep it in our hearts. And I was perplexed when I first came into this, because I was in the concrete world, and we pour 7 days a week, you know. Sometimes we pour 10 days a week. But
True that.
You grow hay.
so what do you do? I say keep it in your heart, but what does that mean?
I don't know.
This is y'all's turn.
I mean, you gotta. I guess keeping it in your heart is just being mindful of what it's supposed to be.
And, you know, there's some text that says kindle no fires on Shabbat. That means physical fire as well as emotional fires. So don't go into a situation that's going to be combative. Let that ride till the next day. But yeah, be mindful of it. And set it apart here. So, But if you do Saturday and Sunday, some people, and I really don't understand this, some people start to count on the 15th day because that's a full moon. I don't understand that at all. Some people say that Sabbath is only during the light hours, the warm hours. But it says from evening to evening, so that kind of wipes that out. Any more questions? Why is it important? That's a good question.
Because he commanded us to keep his schedule.
Because
Yeah.
Daddy said so.
So from first fruits is when you start counting the Omer, is after that?
Yes,
And then, I don't think I quite got when first fruits would be, the day after the first unleavened bread Sabbath, or after the second unleavened bread Sabbath?
after the second.
After the second.
Yeah. So it'd be the 22nd day. What is the Omer? That's a good question. What is the Omer?
Good question.
I don't know.
When they were in the wilderness and Yahweh was providing manna for them, an omer is 1 day's worth of manna. So it's sustenance for 1 day. So if you count the omers, you're counting the days. And if you count, there's another way to count, and that's counting the Sabbaths, right? It's 7 Sabbaths in a day, which is where the dark days come in, because you count the moons, not the sun. Let's go to Psalm 81:3. Okay, what did that say? You wanna read it for me?
Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon on our solemn feast days, for it is a statute for Israel, a law of the God of Jacob. This he establishes in Joseph as a testimony when he went throughout the land of Egypt.
Okay, so let's go to the interlinear on that. So 23:20 is Kodesh, right?
Yeah.
23:18 is the root, and that's what is defined as to be new, to rebuild. So new moon, every time you see new moon in scripture, it's talking about the dark moon, when there is no moon in the sky. So blow the trumpet at the time appointed, our solemn feast days, that is a Hagim, an unnamed pointer. Okay? So, look at 22:82. It's a festival, a victim, look at 22:87. To move in a circle, to march, a sacred procession. So the Hagim are the 3 pilgrimage feasts. And then in Psalm 104, Psalm 104:19.
He appointed the moon for seasons, the sun knows it's going down. You make darkness, and it is night, in which all the beasts of the forest creep about.
Okay. So the moon plainly he says the moon is for seasons. Let's look at the interlinear on that. And that should be Moedim. Yeah, 4150. Moed, an appointed time, a fixed time or season, specifically a festival. So, those are some quick verses that you can go to and pull out. There's more, but those are, I mean, that's pretty plain. The moon is for the Moedim. Did I answer your question, Darwin?
She asked. Yeah, you answered.
You asked me, how do you keep it in your heart?
No. It's still very figurative to me. Like, I like rules. Like, what does that mean? Like, do you not buy anything? Do you know, like.
Well, be obedient to the Sabbath guidelines. You know, and you can do that on Saturday or Sunday, or, don't buy and sell. Don't cause anybody else to do any, so don't work, don't do it. Just follow the guidelines from Shabbat.
The definition of work though, is that like, if you're in your garden, what if you don't consider that work?
Yeah, it's civil work.
My normal job,
Yeah, huh?
like my normal job.
Yeah, it's something you do for money, you know. That's just like I had a guy in Texas ask me, he goes, what about running? He was a runner, he was one of those healthy people.
Damn healthy people.
I know.
Hey, round
Make
makes
it
you
look
shake.
bad for the rest of us. But he said, what about running? That's exertion and, I sweat. And I said, do you do it and relax? He goes, oh yeah, I listen to, praise music while I'm running. And I said,
Run.
I would not consider that work for you. It would be work for me.
The only time I run is when I'm chased, and not very many people chase me, so.
Right. See me run and kill folks that were chasing me. So, yeah, just follow the guidelines.
What about cooking on Shabbat?
Well, it says, put that on the
That
preparation
says bake what
day.
you will bake and boil what you will boil on the preparation day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We eat a ton of leftovers anyway, so. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people that, for unleavened bread, they'll put it in their neighbor's garage and they'll get it. But also, if you look at their life, that's how they come to sin. That's how they do sin anyway, And that's why I've said it a lot. It's not that change is not the big deal, it's the appearance of change in our society. So if you put a box of leavened stuff in your neighbor's garage, do you do your sin the same way? Oftentimes
Just hide,
Yeah.
you just hide your sin
yeah,
inside.
yeah. And the whole purpose of unleavened bread is so we don't carry the sin from year to year. We get to start over, How many times in life and in the world you wish you could do over? Let me do that again, But Yahweh actually gives us that time to should do over. So,
My brother had a good question that I couldn't answer.
okay.
He's been very curious. So when it says, let's sacrificing an animal,
Mhm.
we don't keep herds of animals, so we can't do that.
Right.
What are we supposed to do instead?
That's a good question. I don't think there's anything to do instead of,
Okay.
you know, because Yahweh said this, you know. So I don't think substituting, us rationalizing it and substituting, that gets you in trouble.
Yeah, because he said, at a risk of sounding like we're picking and choosing what he told you to do, what about that?
Right.
So I was like, well, you know what, I have no idea.
Yeah,
There's some we sacrifice other things like our time and stuff like that, but it's not necessarily for that, it's just for.
right.
Didn't Yeshua end the sacrifice?
See, that's
No.
how I've always taken it myself too.
No, and the reason I say no is because there's sacrifices going on in the millennial reign. So, yeah,
Or is it just because we're out in the nations that we're dispersed, that we don't do it anymore, it's more?
well, yeah, I think it's a convenience thing, actually. Because, I mean, if you look at what you're supposed to sacrifice in the course of the year, it's a lot, you know. So I think we've fallen away from that and justified us falling away from it as Yeshua ended the sacrifices. But what do we do with the sacrifices in the millennial reign? Because he's on the throne, you know.
Because there's no temple. I was told that.
Yeah, it doesn't really have to be a temple. They know where the wilderness tabernacle is in the Ark of the Covenant. And Ron Wyatt found those. And that's all they need is a cornerstone and wilderness tabernacle. And they got the red heifers, they got 4 red heifers, Temple Mount Faithful, you know. So, yeah. Anything else?
So how do we keep first fruits nowadays? As we're talking about the sacrifices and that sort of thing, is it having your heart, you know, God, or is there an outward way of keeping it, like unleavened bread, not bread,
Right.
eat the leaven?
So what I've seen people do, they do the wave sheaf offering, you know, and it's 2 loaves, 2 pretty good sized hollow loaves, and they wave that before Yahweh. But they don't do the burnt stuff. I mean, they do, like at Sukkot, we did the drink offering and the burnt offerings for the grain and all. We didn't sacrifice animals, it would have freaked out. But we did, and you know, it was a pretty good experience, you know, doing that. But, yeah. Okay. Move on.